afternoon and a very warm welcome to Conference Conversations, an interactive online talk show where we discuss key issues and questions related to the work of the Conference on the Future of Europe on a regular basis. These conversations are organised under the auspices of the Conference Observatory, which is a joint initiative by the Bertelsmann Stiftung, the European Policy Centre, the King Baudouin Foundation, and the Stiftung Moderator, which aims to observe, critically analyse and inspire deliberations at the conference, and also to develop its own proposals to improve the EU's future participatory and democratic architecture. My name is Jacki Davis. As always, I have the privilege of moderating our entirely interactive debate, and I am delighted to welcome, to take stock of the conference and discuss where we go from here, delighted and honoured to welcome Dubravka Suica, co-chair of the Executive Board of the Conference on the Future of Europe, and of course, European Commission Vice President for Democracy and Demography. Also with us, Caroline Edtstadler, Federal Minister for the EU and Constitution at the Austrian Federal Chancellery, Gabi Bischoff, MEP, Vice Chair of the European Parliament's Constitutional Affairs Committee, Alberto Alemanno, Jean Monnet Professor of EU Law and Policy at HEC Paris, and as always, Dominik Hierlemann with us, Senior Expert at the Bertelsmann Stiftung. Little bit of housekeeping before we get underway. As always, it's a totally interactive conversation. If you'd like to speak, please click on the raise hands button. And when the time comes, I will allow you to talk and ask you to unmute yourself. If you want to write your question, please use the Q&A button, not the chat, the Q&A, and please be as brief as possible so I can see at a glance what you want to know and who your question is for. If you want to tweet out about what you are hearing in this discussion, and we do encourage you to do so, please use the hashtag Conference Conversations. You can also, of course, use hashtag Future of Europe or COFOE, but please also use Conference Conversations. So, Dominik, quick update before I turn to our guests. Where are we now? We last met a couple of weeks ago, a little more than a couple of weeks ago. There's been more citizens panels. There's more coming up. Where are we in the process?
Hello, Jacki. Hello to all of you. So I thought I'd kick off our conversation today with a seasonal quote, and I found one from the late American journalist Martha Gellhorn. In November, you begin to know how long the winter will be. Now, that's perhaps not really motivational, inspirational, but we can apply it to the conference because I think we'll begin to realize that things are moving, yes, but there's still a long, long way ahead of us, a long, busy, intensive winter and also spring to make the conference a success. So a couple of snapshots and questions. So we've got the multilingual discussion platform, which is technically sophisticated with some interesting results with regard to climate and democracy. But are we witnessing an intense and European-wide conversation? Not really. France and Belgium, for example, have conducted national citizens panels. Germany has just announced its very own one. But how will these results be fed into the plenary discussions? Still quite open. The 4 European citizens panels with 200 citizens each, they are in full swing. They've been meeting for the second time now, fully online. And I looked into the discussion and people are still fully engaged. But at the same time, it becomes obvious that in-depth discussions, true deliberation needs time, knowledge, reflection, and concise topics. So where the panels set up in such a way? And finally, the plenary met. Citizens shared ideas. Politicians were constantly saying, we listen to you, we listen to you. But to be very honest and frank, from the outside, it felt a little bit like a first blind date between citizens and politicians with completely different expectations and no common language yet. So this is the November setting.
Thank you. I would like to ask the Vice President a bit later if she felt like she was on a blind date, but we'll come back to that. Commission Vice President, I want to quote back at you something you said at the beginning of this process when you said, the conference will enable citizens from every corner of the European Union and from all backgrounds to share their ideas, hopes and dreams in shaping the Union's future. Can I ask you, you've been so engaged in this process right from the beginning, in framing it, in designing it, questions relating to that later. Has it met your expectations so far? And what has struck you most about the process?
Okay, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for these questions. Yes, it's true that I usually repeat that we have to come to each and every corner of the European Union. our goal sounds ambitious, but I'm still convinced that the conference can reach European citizens in their diversity. The European Citizens Panel, bringing together citizens from all member states and all walks of life, as you said, proved that this unprecedented exercise is a pan-European dialogue and that it can succeed. In other events on the European, national, regional, and local level, many citizens are contributing to the conference, and we have to admit this. But still, unfortunately, there are too many citizens who have not yet heard about this conference. So it's up to all of us to spread the word. I have a problem because we need better communication of the very exercise of the conference.
Thank you. And in listening to the discussion so far, particularly those citizens panels and what has come out of them, has anything surprised you? Is there anything, what struck you most about the nature of those conversations so far?
I'm positively surprised, if I may say so, since throughout my political career, citizens' participation has always been a subject which is close to me, close to my heart. However, this conference is something new, unprecedented, also for me personally. So the plenary session in October, if I may say, was particularly touching because it was a really positive surprise. Never before did I have the occasion to hear the voices of a 16-year-old student from Romania, a newly graduated Finn from Finland, young mother from Italy, and 85-year-old German, retired German, all on the same occasion, all in the same chamber, and being part of this European dialogue. Regarding the content, I was positively surprised and quite impressed to see that European Citizens Panel started with a general exchange on their visions of European future, but quickly they managed to somehow formulate more specific subtopics and orientations, in that way paving the way to concrete recommendations, which they will present, I hope, in December and January. It depends on epidemiology, as you know.
Okay, thank you very much. Gabby, your impressions, what were your expectations, and are they being met? Are they being indeed, as the Commissioner suggested, exceeded?
I have to say I was very, very positively impressed at the last plenary. And I have to say I was also a little bit moved by some of the speeches and the speakers, where you could see that they don't have such an experience like we have to speak in such an audience, but on their clear language, their outspokenness. And I think this brings in a different quality. But I'm very curious about how this will develop in the working groups, because the key work will be done there. And I think to have a real deliberation and not just statements. What I'm a bit sick, really. I'm tired of these general speeches, you know. We had enough in this plenary. So to really engage in-depth debates, I think I'm really looking forward, and I think the citizens will make a difference.
So to use a very English expression, the proof of the pudding will in this case not be in the eating, but in the meeting, in the workshops. Caroline Eschstadler, for you, what were your expectations? Did you have high hopes for the conference, or were they relatively muted hopes? And your feeling now at this stage of the process?
Well, thanks you, and welcome to all of the participants from Vienna. First of all, I'm very happy that I can participate in this dialogue. Dubravka knows it very well. I was one of the responsible representatives of a country who was really always of the opinion that we have to start this dialogue. And I would like to come back to what Dominik said by naming a blind date. I would like to catch up with that, because somehow it is, of course, for the first time that we have an organized, comprehensive dialogue with all the member states, with all the citizens. And of course, we don't have any experience. But we do have a lot of digitalization. We saw it also during the pandemic. And I would like to mention that it is really hard work to bring all the citizens to this process. You have to interest them. You have to invite them personally. You have to go to them and say, okay, maybe you can also organize something in your municipality. And I have the system in the meantime of the municipal councillors. So that means that I want to see one responsible representative politician at the village level, and we do have more than 2,000 villages here in Austria, who is somehow the connecting point, who has information, who shares them. And if you ask me if I'm surprised, I can say, yes, I was surprised. I started already in June last year, these dialogues, before it started at the European level, because I'm very impatient and also demanding, some would say. In the meantime, a lot of people know that there is the possibility to take part of the future in the discussion of the future of the European Union. And I'm really sometimes overwhelmed how high the interest is, how high the knowledge is also, but you really have to keep on going this way and also tell people that it makes sense. And that will be the most crucial question in the end, what is coming out and what we are doing with that politically.
So that's very interesting, because one of the criticisms, and indeed I think the Commissioner was pointing to this a little bit earlier when she said great engagement, but there are many citizens who haven't even heard about us. In your member state, in your experience, more noise, more interest, perhaps. So it's variable. But Alberto, if I could describe you, just looking at what you've said on Twitter, you seem to be something of a convert, because I quoted you at a previous conference conversations talking about the infinitesimal proportion of the population that had got involved, and you said that the ideas coming out of it made it seem as if the process had been hijacked by the few. And then, after engaging and being an expert witness at a conference, a citizens panel, you seem to really have been very impressed by what you saw and what you experienced. Am I right? Is this something for you where your expectations low and they've now, if you like, you've been pleasantly surprised?
Well, Jackie, I'm an early observer of the conference. I think I've been working on this for over 3 years now, since the very moment in which Ursula von der Leyen announced this conference. And even earlier on, I've been working on the Sorbonne speech. So I was really looking at this initiative emerging. And I must say, the experience, the first direct experience acting as an expert witness, has been positive. To wake up on a Sunday morning and to connect with dozens of citizens from all across of Europe asking me questions about how the European Union works was somehow new also to me, somebody who is an educator and whose mission is really to...
We seem to be having a few problems with your sound, Alberto.
improve the understanding of what the
Sorry, we
magic
lost you,
in these interactions, and also their desire to actually learn and listen.
We seem to have a slight problem with your sound, Alberto. I don't know whether it's worth trying without the headphones, whether that's causing the problem, but we lost you for a few seconds there. But let's try. I think we got the essence of what you were saying. Commission Vice President.
Can you hear me now?
No, it seems to have frozen. I'll come back.
Yes, I'm there. I'm there.
Yeah, okay. Commission Vice President, do you think, I mean, you made this point about there are many citizens who haven't heard about it. And indeed, at a previous conference conversations, the last one, we were talking about what's happening in the member states. And there seemed to be a huge variety from Ireland, which is incredibly active, lots going on, to Denmark, where relatively speaking, there hasn't been much interest. What do you think needs to be done, if we can, to improve it in the member states where it's not known? And do you think this is partly linked to the process? So as we get towards concrete recommendations, so on, do you expect the interest level to rise? You're muted at the moment, Commissioner. There we go.
Definitely, I expect the interest to rise, but it is true that all countries and all member states are not evenly represented. The reason for this, I usually say, this conference is not ownership of Commission or European Parliament or the European Council. It's we us own it, and all of us are responsible, because in the end, no, we won't be able to finger point to someone why the results are such and such. So we offer this pan-European, open, inclusive, transparent. So of course, we need always better communication. It's not only us, but all of us who should communicate. And of course, in member states, like for example, in Austria, when you have Caroline, who is really working on it even before the conference dialogue started on European level. So it is very important to have on national level, but also on regional and on local level. So town halls can organize their events. This is very important to understand that there is a multilingual digital platform, that you have to subscribe there, that you have to, of course, adhere to the charter, and then you can organize whatever you want. You can exchange your views with everyone from Malta to Finland, from Portugal to Greece. So it's up to us all, not only Commission, not only we are, of course, signatories of joint declaration, and three presidents promise that they will work. In the end, they will work on, or they will deliver on what would be deliberated. But we badly need all actors from our society to be included. And this is something which is still missing. I have to be completely honest with you, because we need everyone to come on board. If we want to change something, if we want to direct the Europe in the direction which citizens would like to live and work in. This is something which all of us need. And I think also politicians are here more important to organize and to help than to talk, for example, in working groups. When we had working groups last time in October, what was the main complaint? That politicians were talking the most time and not the citizens. So we want citizens. This is citizens-oriented exercise, and they are at the heart of the exercise. And this is what we want to achieve. But so experienced politicians come there and start talking because they don't shy. They have, you know,
Absolutely. A comment from one of our audience, Martin de Groot, who says, if the conference is supposed to reach all corners of Europe, it needs to proactively and explicitly include marginalized community. And Carolina, you talked about going down to the village level. What has been the key, do you think, to your success in terms of generating that higher level of awareness, higher level of interest than we see in some EU countries?
First of all, I started 1 year earlier. So I had 1 year more time to promote this conference on the future of Europe. I did it after we decided in the General Affairs Council about the mandate, and then I started my, if you so want, a campaign. The second thing is that I really gained a lot of interest regarding these municipal councillors. So in the meantime, there are more than 1,200 councillors at the local level who are registered as EU councillors, who get direct information from the Federal Chancellery and my ministry, which is located in the Federal Chancellery. They get 4 times a year a magazine with informations where also other councillors are talking about their experiences. We are doing a networking meeting next year with all these councillors to exchange experiences. Also, they get packages if they want to do meetings and discussions and debates in their municipalities. And if there is time from time to time, I'm also going there if we are not having a lockdown, as we do it at the moment in Austria. So I think that's the key. And the other thing is that I really was very concrete regarding the youth. And there was the idea also of the Austrian Parliament already many months ago. We have 9 regions in Austria. So in every region, we had a young European ambassador, and these 9 young people met in the parliament. And then I invited them to come to the Austrian Chancellery because there was not enough time to discuss things. And here I created together with them the idea of a young conference on the future of Europe. And we did this last week under very strict conditions regarding the Corona management. And there were more than 100 young people between 16 and 30 discussing all the topics we see also at the platform. And that was very interesting. I could go into more details what their interests are, but I think I stop at that.
Thank you very much, Gabby. I mean, isn't it, I suppose it's inevitable to an extent. At the beginning of this, we're talking a lot about process. We're talking about getting things started. We don't have the concrete ideas, the concrete proposals for reform. So was it always inevitable that this part would be tough? Or do you think more can and should have been done to reach out to more citizens and get more of them engaged?
Yeah, on one hand, I mean, this process was so slow that people got bored about the conference. So I think what we need really is the hot phase where we really have topics that interest more people than the general academic that is interested in European affairs. And that is the problem we are facing. So I think we need to go out more. And for example, also, I live in Berlin. We started a broad network Berlin Conference on the Future of Europe with citizens, with civil society, with politicians, European level, local level, but also with the sports club, with the music clubs. And we are now going into the shopping areas with influencers, asking people about the future of Europe. So go to the people with the conference, not wait that the people are coming to your events on the conference. But I think it's also the issues. And someone was talking about marginalized communities. I think this is one approach, but if we would at least interest the general public, the normal citizen, I think we also need to do it in a way on topics that they are interested in and in a way to reach them. And I think we can still change this in this hot phase now, but I think we cannot do it in the usual modes we are doing it. Yeah. I mean, Europe, it mirrors just the problem we have in the European Union to reach out to a broader audience of people, not only some pro-European that are interested, but for me, we can still use the opportunity, and I agree that it's a responsibility on all levels to do so now. But I'm really convinced once we have some critical debates, a bit juicy and a bit more down to earth, this will change.
But it's interesting now, Alberto, because, and then I'll come to you, Dominik, but Alberto, you talked in a tweet about your experience last week. You said, we are creating a mini transnational conversation among citizens who would not otherwise talk about the European Union. So it is working to an extent. It may not be as wide-reaching as was hoped, but it is working. Alberto, what's your feeling about reaching out even more? If you can hear me.
It is correct.
Yeah.
It is correct. I think what we have been witnessing over the last few weeks with these citizens coming together is a mini temporary transnational conversation among citizens who would not otherwise discuss about the European Union. Will these citizens trigger conversations that will draw the attention of the media in the political class so that they will be amplified all across Europe? Well, this is the hope. Because unless this will happen, it will be very difficult for this conference on the future of Europe to actually get traction and to exercise this indirect effect on the European media space and in the European political space. This hasn't happened so far. It doesn't mean it won't happen, but we are already halfway of the conference. So unless this acceleration will occur before Christmas, it would be very difficult then to catch up. And as Gabi was saying, there is a fatigue. There is a fatigue around this conference. We're not starting this from scratch. We are really starting from a sort of handicap position in which this conference has been depicted as something that was not starting, that it was not good enough, that it was simply cosmetic, that it was not necessarily exercising at the same time, whose objective is still not very clear today.
Okay, thank you. A reaction, Dominik, if you would. Clement Schuster in our audience says, isn't it a bit of wrong expectation management of, he says, introducing a fully new process all over the European Union at the same time without specific training or education, and then to expect to get something that we can call a citizen's voice about the future of Europe? Have we, I think he's implying, tried to run before we could walk, because it is new, it is unique, it is experimental? Or is it important to start, learn from that and build on it later?
Well, the question is, of course, who needs to be trained? I think it's not the citizens, you know, they are just there and they want to be involved. But of course, we do not have a common understanding of participation in the EU. And we also do not have an understanding of what real and good deliberation means. I mean, going back to your earlier quote, you know, I would say the proof of the pudding looks like greeting at the moment, you know, so citizens and politicians meet and greet, and there is a nice exchange, a sequence of comments. But politics, I mean, is about having a discourse, having a fight, having a real discussion, and nothing like that have I seen up until now. And this is, I think, what I expect the plenary to be. So overall, it is a kind of very scattered picture I see, and I hear for the very first time politicians kind of criticizing their very own process. I think that's not necessary. So we do not need to criticize the process up until now, but now we need to step up because there is a clear correlation between visibility and impact. And if there is no visibility of the conference, there will be no impact at all. We can have the most perfect citizens panels and the best results. So if it's not made public, if it's not seen by the general public and not taken seriously by the institutions, then we'll have a problem.
Let's come to that point about being taken seriously by the institutions. First, in terms of the procedure, Commission Vice President, what it's not clear, Dominik said at the beginning, it's still not clear to many how the results of the citizens panels in particular will impact on the conference work in very concrete terms. You've said it is not just a listing exercise. You gave a speech a couple of weeks ago and you said it started with a clear commitment of presidents of the European Parliament, Council and Commission to follow up on these deliberations. Is it becoming clearer how that is actually, so all these discussions are going to translate into concrete recommendations?
Yeah, thank you for this. It is becoming clearer, and the reason why last plenary maybe was not that interesting to answer Dominik was because there were no, at that point, there were no recommendations from citizens panels because they have been, at that moment they started. So this time in December, if everything goes on according to timeline, then we will have first recommendations from citizens panel 1 and 2, and then we will have enough substance to deliberate, to discuss during the plenary. This was the reason why we couldn't make this more vivid, more interesting in October. But I'm sure that December plenary will bring the completely new atmosphere and completely different discourse. So I'm sure that the most important issues are from multilingual digital platform. The ideas are transferred to citizens panels, from citizens panels to conference plenaries via groups and via their representatives in conference plenary. As you know, there are 4 times 200, 800 people, and each panel has 20 representatives, and they have their spokesperson there. So they will be representatives. The exercise is complex. It is complex because if without clear rules of procedure, there will be anarchy in the conference. So we badly needed very fixed and firm rules of procedure, and now we go on. We are in the middle of the process, and I'm definitely positive that the deliberations from panels would feed into conference plenary and then later on into final conclusions.
And there's a question from Christiana Portes-Weigel in our audience who says, in terms of the reaction to what the citizens suggest, how will they be informed? What contribution from them has been taken up? I.e., how is thought being given to linking the work that they did to the eventual outcome? And how important will it be to be able to point to that and say, we invited you to come and talk, we invited you to give us your views, and it made a difference, it was worth it? Can we send to you again, please, Ms. Vice President?
Remembers many citizens panels in last 10, 15, 20 years. And citizens, not citizens panels, but citizens dialogues. It was debate for debate's sake. This time, we promised feedback mechanism. There is follow-up and feedback mechanism, which means that citizens can follow what is happening with his idea via citizens, via multilingual digital platform. So to avoid disappointment, we need to explain why a specific proposal is accepted, why it is rejected, or why is it postponed. This means feedback. For example, there are ideas on digital platform that relate more to the competence of member states, less of the European Union institutions. As governments, however, as governments and the national parliaments are key stakeholders in the conference, including the plenary, it would be ideal to find common feedback that we can provide to citizens in these cases too. So we must not disappoint the expectations of our citizens. And this is the reason why this process is very important and why we have to be concrete. So we have to give back the information to our citizens. This is what our Common Secretariat is doing together with us. It's not only report is fine, but we need also more personalized replies to our citizens. This is what I hope that we will manage to do it.
A lot of questions, in fact, about communication with the citizens, both during the process and at the end of it. And indeed, someone asking whether you are sharing the comms strategy, Carolina, that you have used with other countries, so maybe they can learn from it and emulate it. How important do you think this question is? Is it a question of expectation management so that citizens are not disappointed? Or is it a question of living up to their expectations, that they are right? We ask them to take part, we ask them to join in this discussion. They are right to expect that they will be heard.
I think both is correct. Of course, we have to be very, it is a delicate question what they await from us and what we can really do in the end. We are not awaiting from people that they say, listen, you have to change Article 15, paragraph 2 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. They tell us, okay, for example, last week, the young people told me, we have to do more regarding the mental health of young people, especially during the pandemic. It turned out that, and then we have to sort out what can we do on the national level, what has to be done at the European level, and of course we have to give them an answer. It is not something which is buff and it's over and nothing happened. And this is a question of communication, of course, from the European level, but also from the national level. I am communicating to this European conference nearly every week. But I tell you, it's not easy to get an interview in the newspaper on the question of where is the future of the European Union, because it's not interesting enough for people. And sometimes it's too positive. There is no drama. It's something we are constantly doing. And I think we have to work on that also.
Thank you. Gabby, if I could ask you a different question, and there are some questions about what this means for the future of European democracy and whether it can be replicated. I want to come back to that in a minute. But in terms of the drivers of the process, as we move towards the culmination of this conference and bringing all these the citizens panels, the national events, all the different deliberations together, how do you see the politics here in terms of the role of the different institutions, the Parliament, the Commission, the Council, national governments? As I said earlier, we've seen varying degrees of enthusiasm for this process, certainly from national governments, also it must be said from MEPs, some very committed to it, some much less so. How do you see that playing out, and how important will that interinstitutional interplay be when we come to the crunch?
The interinstitutional interplay was quite complex at the beginning.
Already, exactly.
But I think it is also quite learning by doing experience. But I think, indeed, we now have to get this conference going to become interesting, to really have deliberations, debates. And then we'll go into another phase that will start, I think, beginning of next year already, to think about how do we safeguard the results. And for me, it was important in this complicated process in the beginning to agree that all the working groups will come up with reports and concrete proposals. And I still trust that we all agreed, all institutions, that we will do a final report and proposals sort of in a way of a broad consensus. And this involves, and this will be an interesting question, will it be a consensus between all stakeholders of the plenary or only the institutionals? For me, the last would be a no-go, because I think the link between what is happening in the citizens panels and the plenary is important. And I see these members of the citizens panels in the plenary as also the guardians for what happened and what will happen with the proposals of the citizens panels. And therefore, I think I will watch, and I think I'm sure the whole parliament will watch this very closely, that we all work here and discuss on the same level. and that we really need to communicate also why certain proposals were taken on board and maybe others didn't find this consensus. And I think this is, for me, part of these deliberations. But I have to say, at the same time, I'm quite critical in the meantime about the digital platform. What we can see is indeed that it is not really used by ordinary citizens very much. It's very much used by civil society organizations, many also from Brussels, and the expectations were higher. Okay, I can say we are learning by doing, so I think we also need to adapt it, how this feeds in the citizens' panels. But I have to say we will guard in the end that the proposals will be taken serious, will be discussed serious, but also for this, we need a methodology. And I have to say, I'm in my former life, I'm an experienced moderator in many and trained. And when I went to the working groups and I saw there's no methodology, I thought, okay, in a normal meeting, I would go in or workshop, I see this, I would say, okay, they don't want a concrete outcome. But now it will be changed. We will have a methodology also for the working groups. And here then to make sure that the debates can take place there and that we will all guard the results.
Thank you very much. Alberto, in terms of this process and the expectations that citizens have and how you see that interplay between the different institutions who started, as we said, with varying degrees of enthusiasm for the process. I mean, they cannot ignore what comes out of this now, can they? But given what Dominik said earlier about no visibility means no impact, credibility is undermined if there's not enough outreach. How do you see this playing out? And for you, is it about managing expectations, lowering them effectively, or living up to them? Alberto, can you hear me? No, you're muted, Alberto. I don't know whether that is the problem. No, we seem to have a problem with Alberto's connection at the moment. Commissioner, in terms of where we go from here, you talked about, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a listening exercise. And you said in that speech that you gave earlier this month, you said, I am firmly convinced that bringing citizens into the heart of this policy making in the EU strengthens representative democracy. And I hope that historians may look at European democracy from a pre and post-conference perspective. We have a number of questions about that very question of democracy. I'll come to them in a moment. But what did you mean by that when you said you hope that historians will see a before and after? Because at other conference conversations, people have said there is no going back. This is now going to be a permanent part of the landscape. And there's a specific question on that to you, Gabby, which I'll come to in a moment. But Commissioner, how do you see this? Has this blind date that you've been on, if I can borrow from Dominik earlier, is this now going to become a permanent feature of our landscape? And how do you see its role in the future?
From my personal point of view, it would be desirable if the conference opens a new chapter of citizens' involvement in European policy. This is what we want to achieve with this conference. This is the reason why we offered the conference, in order to narrow this gap which evidently exists between us policymakers and citizens. We want citizens to be part of drafting European policies. This is our ultimate goal. Of course, it's not easy to achieve this. I even hope, as you quoted, that political scientists may look at European democracy from the perspective of pre- and post-conference perspective. Although you know that we cannot preempt the outcome of the conference, I can imagine as one of its results, participatory elements will play a more important role in European Union policy making process. I know that some parliamentarians were not in favor of this because they said, why on earth do we need these citizens? We are elected directly by citizens, so why I represent my constituency? But we usually reply, this is only to empower you. This is only to strengthen you. today you cannot wait 4 or 5 years in order to interact with your people, with your citizens, because people are in a minute, in a second nowadays, due to new technologies, due to different social media, due to digital media, they are immediately informed. So we have to interact with our citizens in the period between 2 elections. So we cannot allow that this gap exists, and this gap evidently exists, although some of us don't want to recognize this, to admit this, some yes. So this is how I see, and for us, we haven't decided yet, but we are now thinking how to keep one of these tools as a permanent mechanism. For example, although Mrs. Gabriele Bischoff thinks that multilingual digital platform is not good enough, we think that exactly this platform could be a permanent tool after the conference will be over, because we think that we need constant contact. Although we have different, have your say, different citizens dialogues, but this platform would be a very good tool. So we haven't decided, as I said, but we are thinking about this.
Looking at it actively. Thank you. Comment from one of our audience. Nico Keppen says, to be a success, wasn't it necessary to first have a discussion about what kind of democracy we agree on the need for compromise in a society with so many different visions and opinions? He said this could be in a European year for democracy, 2023, he suggests, because now I get the feeling many citizens wanting democracy, its institutions and politicians to do what they need and want, see them as not doing that, and so they step away. But a concrete question to you, Gabby, about the Parliament's attitude. Wolfgang Petzel asks you, what is the state of the debate in the European Parliament with regards to the continuation of the process and the involvement of citizens in it? And he questions, a permanent citizen assembly to continue beyond April 2022? Do we turn this from an ad hoc moment to a permanent mechanism? What's your feeling? Same question to you in a moment, Carolina, and to Dominik. Gabby first.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are working in the AFCO on this, and we think that we should use this big European experiment to draw our lessons from it, to keep on what works well, and to adapt where we see we need to do some adaptations to really have it running and going. And therefore, I think we always had highs and downs of these debates on more participatory democracy in Europe. I've seen it over the last 20 years coming and going. I think this is the opportunity. I'm still convinced that the citizens panels, maybe not as one continuing all the time, but having ongoing citizens panels, agoras, on different important issues. I think this will come out. This is my glass bowl. I think this will be one of the outcomes, because what we can see is really that only in the citizens panel, with the criteria also that were so important for the Parliament. And when I was in this preparatory group, for me, it was very important that we really match the variety of society, have people with high education, low education, high income, lower income, medium income, and their experience of life. So I think this should continue. We have to see how we adapt it after the experience. And with the platform, I'm not against the digital platform. I think in these times it could be good, but what we can see is that we would need to adapt it, to do it different, to really make it interesting and available to all citizens.
Do you think your view is widely shared within the Parliament? Are there many MPs who see it the way you do?
I would differentiate. I think in the AFCO, yes, you would have a majority here on these questions, but I think it will be, people need to experience things to see how it works. And I think this will, in my view, change also the perception of the citizens panels. And I have to say, we have experience on national level, on regional level with this, and to do it on a European scale, I think, and people experience it, will help also to have more openness. And for me, this is an addition to representative democracy. It doesn't replace it. So I don't share the concerns. I see it as a useful addition, especially because if we don't reach out with the European project and initiatives more to normal citizens all over Europe, we will fail. So I think for me, it's not a mistake to try it, but it would be a mistake if we wouldn't and not learn from our mistakes.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, organizations can only survive if they are learning organizations.
Thank
this
you.
also refers to the institution.
Absolutely. Carolina, direct power adds to that from our audience. Not only could citizens' assemblies become permanent tools of democracy in Europe, but also could their recommendations trigger more obligatory processes? For example, Darag says referendums and treaty change. So going beyond where we are now and saying there will definitely be a tangible result. I mean, that might, we already see some reluctance in the Council of Ministers, and I'll come to the Commissioner on that in a moment, but do you see this as a permanent tool? And if you do, a permanent tool with teeth, or how could it best be organized?
To keep the answer short, I would say, as this conference of the future of Europe takes place during the pandemic and we are still not out of the woods, I would not exclude to organize also a citizen panel in the future, in the near or middle future, because the most important thing is that people exchange views also, that there is really an interaction also going between the citizens of different member states. And I also would like to say that it is not necessarily a citizens panel between all the member states. Maybe there are certain regions which have certain interests and have then one opinion in this region. I think that is also something, especially since the Brexit, that the balance of power has changed, and that we need more allies for certain topics, certain items in the European Union, in the family, and that could also come down to the citizen level. That's the one thing. The second thing I would like to mention is that if in the end we can succeed to increase the interest for the European Union, if we can increase the knowledge which is among the citizens regarding the European Union, the strengths, but also their weaknesses, then we achieved a lot. And of course, I was very ambitious at the beginning. I'm still maybe the most ambitious representative of a member state. I could imagine that we really have a change of the treaties in certain points. That of course has to be discussed, and we have to fulfill the high expectations of the citizens. So in the end, we have to do something with the results of this conference.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Commission Vice President, in a moment. But Dominik, just in terms of the way forward for this process, and somebody said, Jeff Van Loik from our audience says, Dominik, isn't the objective of deliberative democracy to avoid the fight and polarization that representative democracy is nowadays? And if so, how's that going to be dealt with in the plenary when this very polarization is going to happen? So you start a process designed to seek consensus, but it becomes conflictual in the same way that representative democracy is. A comment to that, if you would.
Well, of course, it is about seeking consensus, but citizens' participation is not about love, peace, and harmony. I mean, there is an intense debate, and we need to have that intense debate. And actually, when I look at European politics, this is what we are missing very often. So very often that kind of blurry consensus, and this is what citizens see. No, we need to have real debates. And the conference, it has to produce results. And if one of the results is a kind of permanent mechanism, then good on it. So that's one option. But it shouldn't be just the usual EU institutional reflex. So there is a problem, we create an institution. It's more about a different approach, a different cultural understanding, as I was saying at the beginning, because there is already a plethora of participation instruments at the European level, even more than at the national level, quite often, but it is not visible, there is no impact, and there is no real strategy how these things are connected. So, and that's I think where we are all learning. So citizens' assemblies, they are not the Swiss Army knife that solves all problems, definitely not. So there will be disappointments, but they need to be constructed very carefully from the beginning on. And that was, I think, one of the failure with regard to the conference, that the topics are just far too broad. And if you have such a broad topic, so results, they will just go all over the place. And then we've got to deal with the results. So in future, precise topics and a methodology that is being understood by everyone.
Thank you. But of course, if you'd gone for precise topics, people would have said, well, who are you to decide what they should talk about? Commission Vice President, I don't know whether you want to react to that, but then I also wanted to ask you about that interplay between the institutions. And we've had a question also from Katia Repel, who says a number of the ideas coming up in the panel sessions and the IT platform go beyond current EU competences. Yes, we're back to the treaty change debate. How will the final report from the conference take stock of this? Just turn them down, or pass them on to member states, or proposed adaptations and competences? And when we look at Gabby referred to the fact that it wasn't easy, put it mildly, to get an interinstitutional agreement on the conference, on the setup. How do you see that now in terms of the results and what happens to them? How do you see that interplay working between yourselves in the Commission, with the Parliament, with the Council? How's it going to work?
Thank you. This is first time that three institutions decided to do something at this scale. So three institutions aligned. Yes, there were problems behind the curtains, but little by little we agreed, and I don't see problems. Joint declaration envisaged this common work, as you know, with the three presidents of three institutions, and they promised that they will act accordingly. So what we are going to do is to try to draw all these conclusions, but we have to do them in consensual way. Otherwise, there won't be end of this conference. So this is what we are aiming at and what we will try to achieve. Of course, Dominik said that the topics are too broad. You know, on the platform you have these 9 topics plus open box. Open box may have all other topics. In citizens panels, you have these 4 clusters. You have 4 clusters on different topics. So people want to talk about everything. So people from Finland don't have same interest as people from Malta, you know. So they open new ideas, and we have to take this into consideration. Yes, we are learning with this exercise. We usually say this is not anymore business as usual, not politics, not the world. European Union role in the world is different. All of us are witnesses of what is happening around us. So nothing can be taken for granted, especially not our democracy. So we have to somehow cherish it. This is I think that we will in the end be positive and have good results. But of course we have to of course be guardian of this and try to achieve the best results ever. So what the joint declaration also envisaged, Mrs. Bischoff said she wanted to have all straight up society. Yes, you have there half men, half women, 1/3 of young people. Young people are from 16 to 25, not 28. So we are talking about their future. So it's not coincidence that Recovery and Resilience Plan is called Next Generation EU. So we are envisaging and we are creating the future for next generation now together with them. So this is the reason why 1/3 of them are there. Of course, 800 citizens may be not enough. Maybe we need 8,000 or 80,000, you know. But this is what we planned at the beginning. But our invitation to everyone to take part is, I think that no democracy in the world has ever tried something similar at this scale. And we have to try to help all of us to have good results and to make our democracy, of course, better. So yes, there are a lot of ideas which are beyond our competitions, beyond our, not competition, but beyond our competencies. Of course, beyond our competencies. So I don't want to mention change of treaty because it's not our goal. We haven't said, but if citizens ask for this, you remember first inaugural speech of Ursula von der Leyen in European Parliament in 2019, in July. You remember last State of the Union speech. So if citizens ask, we will have to act accordingly. And this is what we are trying to look at and see what will help Europeans to live better lives.
Thank you. I want to put you all on the spot in a minute, but before I do that, Carolina, a quick comment to this. The Commissioner saying, you know, we need at the end of this to reach a consensus. Otherwise, we will get nowhere. We need to find common ground. But consensus would indicate there are some member states who've made it absolutely clear treaty change is off the table. So the question that came from our audience, does that mean you simply don't put forward anything that might involve treaty change, or you put it up to the member states and let them have the battle about it later on? How do you see dealing with that issue? Because citizens don't care about competencies. They don't even know what it means. They just want action on what they want action on.
True, and that's what I always say. The European Union is not in Brussels or in Strasbourg. She's there where it is there where the European citizens have problems and want to see solutions from the European level, the national level, the regional or the local level. And that's why I would also say we can't decide by now if there should be or have to be some treaty changes or not. We have simply be honest now, talk to the citizens, take their questions, and then decide if for this or that a treaty change is necessary or not. That's my message. So it's not up to us now to decide to make a treaty change or not. And the question, if we get a unanimity for all from all the member states for a certain change of treaty, that's another question.
Thank you. We are almost out of time. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there were so many questions, managed to squeeze quite a lot in, but there were many, many more. Apologies, we couldn't get to more of them, but I want to ask each of you, our guests, Dominik, you can reply, but I've asked you before, I don't know whether your dreams are changing, but I wanted to go back to the quote I spoke about at the beginning from the Vice President about everyone sharing their ideas, their hopes, their dreams in shaping the future. In a sentence and a half, if you would, for each of you. And Gabby, I'll start with you this time. I'll come to Carolina. Dominik, nod at me if you want to add something here or if you want to leave it to our guests. And I'm going to ask the Commissioner last. And Commissioner, I'm going to ask you to take your Commission Vice President hat off, your Executive Board hat off. And for each of you, speaking as individual citizens, if you had a dream for the outcome of this conference, whether it be content or process-wise, what would your dream be and why? Gabby?
My dream would be that we again share a joint vision of a Europe that creates prosperity for all and that creates that we all think, yes, we will have a good future and we can bring in our voices to make this vision and this future a reality and a good reality for everyone. So in my view, this would give a new impetus to the European project, something like a restart together with everyone. And we will see in which direction citizens want to go in terms of policies and certain policies, but also in my vision, a Europe that is capable to act with 27 needs at least to adapt some of the processes, because at the moment this is not happening. And for me, anonymity is one of these obstacles, I have to say.
So look at the instruments as well as the content. Carolina, for you, your dream, if you have one.
Yeah, my dream is that every young person in the European Union at least knows what the European Union is, what it achieved in the last decades, and what it means that we want to preserve that for the future generations, and that everyone is really ready to work on that also.
Thank you very much. Dominik, I don't know whether you want to add in terms of your dream, maybe not your big dream at the moment, but at this stage in the process, do you have a dream for where it goes from here?
Oh, so a very practical Angela Merkel-like dream. So I would say it is, well, if the three institutions act as harmoniously and decisively and seriously as our three guests from the three institutions today, that would be pretty good already.
Thank you very much. I like that, an Angela Merkel style dream. Commission Vice President, I wanted to leave you till last, as a citizen, your great hope, your dream for the outcome of this conference.
Believe me, it doesn't. I represent Commission here that I and my colleagues don't want changes too. So we are. This is my first sentence. Then I hope that the conference allows us to take European democracy to a new level. We should enhance, again, our representative democracy by bringing citizens to European policy making process and to European policy makers. And my dream is that the conference lays the foundation for a real European public sphere, and that Europeans come together more often in order to discuss about our common future. And I hope this will be in the end of our process. And maybe I'm I owe one answer. We have to finish by spring next year, not to finish the process. The conference will be over and listening to citizens. They will have, by that time, they will have done their job. But then key tasks start. So we have at that moment to start offering new legislation, new proposals, and we need another half of our mandate in order to act accordingly. And this is the reason why the period is so maybe shrink at this moment, but I'm sure that we will bring more Europeans to discuss about our common future also in future. And this
thank you so much, and thank you for responding there to that timeline question, and was the time too short? So ladies and gentlemen, that is all we have time for. Just a couple of things to mention before we go. The Conference Observatory's high-level advisory group is working with the observatory team to prepare an interim report which will put forward proposals to feed into that conference process, so watch out for those. Our next conference conversations will be on December the 16th, where we're going to take stock of how the European citizens panels are going as they reach that crunch phase and look ahead to the next conference plenary. So lots to discuss then. In the meantime, don't forget to follow the observatory on Twitter to be kept up to date with all the latest developments. And as always, and in the spirit of participatory democracy, which lies at the heart of the Conference on the Future of Europe, we would again like to hear from you what you would like us to discuss, the questions you would like me to put to future guests on Conference Conversations. The opportunity to do so will flash up at the end of this event. But Gabby, Carolina, Commission Vice President Dominik, thank you so much for a great discussion. I wish we had twice the time, but we've covered an enormous amount of ground in 60 minutes. Thank you so much for finding the time, and goodbye.
Goodbye and thank you.